Imagine spending your whole life working toward a moment like this. Maria Broaddus was 40 years old, senior vice president at an insurance firm in Manhattan. 3 young kids, a wife, and a house, a real house, in one of the quietest, safest, most coveted neighborhoods in New Jersey, Westfield, 45 minutes from New York City. The kind of place where kids ride bikes in the street and nobody locks their door. $1.3 million, 6 bedrooms, the dream. He never moved in, because before a single piece of furniture crossed that threshold, before his children spent one night inside those walls, a letter showed up in the mailbox. No return address, no name, just a question typed on paper. Do you know what lies within the walls of 657 Boulevard? The letter started almost warmly. Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood. It felt normal for about 3 seconds. Then the author explained who he was. He said his grandfather had watched over that house since the 1920s. His father watched in the 1960s. And now it was his turn. He had a name for himself. He called himself the Watcher. And he said the house had been waiting, not for just any family, for something specific. He called it young blood. He asked if Derek would bring him young blood. Said the house needed it. Said he was already watching and had been for a long time. Derek was alone in the house when he read it. He called the police. An officer showed up, looked at the letter, and told Derek to secure his doors. That was it. Lock your doors. The family had already sold their previous home, so they moved in temporarily with relatives while renovations continued on 657 Boulevard. They tried to convince themselves it was a one-time thing, a disturbed neighbor, a sick joke. Then the second letter arrived. This time, there was no warmth at all. The Watcher wrote that every window, every door in 657 Boulevard allowed him to watch, to track their every movement through the house. Who am I? I am the Watcher, and have been in control of 657 Boulevard for the better part of 2 decades. And then came the part that made Maria Broaddus forget how to breathe. He knew their names. He hadn't asked anyone. He hadn't looked them up. He had learned them by listening from outside. I am pleased to know your names now, and the name of the young blood you have brought to me. You certainly say their names often. He stood outside and listened to them call their children, and wrote it all down. The third letter mentioned their daughter by her talent, said he had seen her drawing inside the enclosed porch, described what she was doing. And then he asked about the basement, in a way nobody asks about a basement. Will the young blood play in the basement, or are they too afraid to go down there alone? I would be very afraid if I were them. It is far away from the rest of the house. If you were upstairs, you would never hear them scream. The Broaddus family never spent a single night in that house. The police opened an investigation. Their immediate focus was on the family next door, the Langfords, who had lived there since the 1960s. The letters referenced a grandfather in the 1920s and a father in the 1960s. The Langfords fit. One of the sons, Michael, had been diagnosed with a mental illness. He became a person of interest. He was questioned. He denied everything. No evidence connected him to the letters. The Broadduses didn't stop there. Out of their own pocket, they hired a forensic linguist to analyze the writing. A former NYPD officer, a private investigator, an ex-FBI profiler. They spent a fortune trying to find one person. They found nothing. No fingerprints, no digital trail. No camera had caught anyone. But then came a result nobody expected. DNA testing on one of the envelopes revealed that whoever had licked it shut was a woman. No match was ever found. One night during police surveillance, a car pulled up in front of 657 Boulevard and stayed there too long. Officers approached. It was a young woman. She explained that her boyfriend lived on the same street and that he was heavily into dark video games. In one of them, the character he played was called the Watcher. The boyfriend agreed to be questioned. He never showed up for either of the two scheduled interviews. Not enough evidence to move forward. The case was escalated to the Union County Prosecutor's Office. Full investigation, more resources, more time. Same answer the Broadduses tried to sell. They couldn't, because the law required them to disclose the letters to any serious buyer. Every time someone read them, they walked. They tried to demolish the house and subdivide the lot. The Westfield Planning Board voted against it after a 4-hour public meeting. Neighbors argued it would damage the character of the street. Those same neighbors, many of them, privately believed the Broadduses had written the letters themselves, that Derek had buyer's remorse on a $1.3 million property and made the whole thing up to escape the deal. That theory spread. It became gossip. It became quiet accusations at neighborhood meetings. Meanwhile, they rented the house out. Another family moved in. Weeks later, a fourth letter arrived, addressed to Derek and Maria, even though they no longer lived there. It opened like this: to the vile and spiteful Derek and his wench of a wife, Maria. The Watcher said he might be one of the neighbors they had already spoken to. Maybe someone they had looked directly in the eyes. Turn around, idiots. Maybe you do know who I am, and you're too scared to say anything. Good move. A family that bought their dream home, being mocked by someone they would never find. In 2019, 5 years after the first letter, they sold. $400,000 in losses. $400,000. Because of letters. Because of a name on an envelope that nobody ever identified. And the money is the part you can actually measure. What you can't measure is what it did to the children. To the girl who was 5 years old when this began, the one a stranger had described drawing on the porch. To all three of them, who grew up knowing that someone out there knew their names, knew where they played, and had written that if they went down to the basement, nobody upstairs would hear them scream. The previous owners, a couple who had lived in that house for 23 years, told investigators they had also received a letter from the Watcher. Just one, a few days before they moved out. He thanked them for taking good care of the house. They found it strange. They threw it away. Never thought about it again. 23 years. One letter. Thank you for your care. And the Broadduses? 4 letters in 18 months. 5 years of a living nightmare. $400,000 gone. Why them? Nobody has ever been able to answer that. The case is officially listed as inactive. Not closed, inactive. The difference matters. It will reopen if real evidence surfaces. None has. The Watcher has never attempted contact with the current owners of 657 Boulevard. And that's when you stop and ask yourself, was any of this ever really about the house? Because look at what he actually did. He didn't break in. He didn't attack anyone. He didn't steal anything. He watched. He described. He wrote in careful, almost literary sentences. Investigators describe the writing as elaborate, controlled, intentional. He knew where the children played. He knew which window faced the porch. He knew that family's daily rhythms better than any neighbor ever would. And he did it for decades, across multiple families, without leaving a single trace. The DNA said, woman. The writing said someone precise, patient, methodical. The references to a grandfather and a father said this went back a long time, that it was a mission passed down through generations. Or at least, that's what he wanted them to believe. It could have been one person, could have been more than one, could be someone you'd walk past on the street tomorrow and feel absolutely nothing. We don't know. Nobody does. And that is exactly the point. 657 Boulevard is still there, in Westfield, New Jersey. A house on a quiet street, in a quiet town, where kids still ride bikes and people still don't lock their doors. If you drove past it today, you wouldn't know a thing. The watcher knew it would be that way. That's exactly what he counted on. The normalcy of the street, the trust people place in their own front door, the assumption that what happens inside a home stays inside a home. He watched 3 families from the outside, documented everything, claimed ownership over something that was never his. And when the Broadduses finally left, he let them go. Because to him, the house was never theirs. It was his. It had always been his. And somewhere in Westfield, New Jersey, he already knows who lives there now.